Dust swirled low around cracked boots and bowed heads as the wind scraped through the bones of a frontier town forgotten by time. The sky hung heavy, the color of ash, and in the center of the square, a rough wooden platform creaked beneath the weight of shame. A man stood atop it, lean, leathery, hollow-eyed, with 5 girls behind him, lined up like livestock. Their dresses were threadbare and faded, hems uneven, shoulders slumped. The eldest, Rose, held the youngest, Lily, close with a protective hand, while Violet stood between them and Iris, with Daisy clinging to Rose's other side, all their faces blank and unreadable. Their eyes didn't lift, not to the murmuring townsfolk, not to the swinging saloon doors, not to their father as he cleared his throat, and said flatly, "They eat too much. They ain't worth it. I need hands, not mouths." He opened the bidding like a man selling oxen. Then silence followed, not the stunned kind, but the familiar one, the kind that meant no one was surprised. Times were hard, dignity harder. Someone coughed. A man shifted, and just as a hand began to rise, a voice cut through it. "I have 5 sons." Every head turned. A man stood at the edge of the gathering, tall, still wrapped in a wool coat that bore the wear of winter storms. His beard was streaked with gray, his eyes dark as soil. He didn't offer silver, just the sentence. The sheriff standing nearby watched for trouble, then nodded once. "Law don't say love's required, only shelter." The father looked at the stranger, then at the girls, then shrugged. "You're burdened now," he muttered, already stepping down with no farewell. No blessing. The girls were ushered into a creaking buckboard. Samuel Thompson guided the reins. The wheels rolled slow over frost-bitten ground. No one spoke. The girls sat huddled in a worn quilt stitched by a mother they hadn't named in years. Lily trembled. Violet held her hand. Rose stared out across the hills with dry eyes, while Iris and Daisy pressed close together. The prairie rolled on flat and unforgiving. Fences had long since fallen. Trees stood like ghosts. And ahead, somewhere in the dusk and silence, waited a house they'd never seen and sons they didn't know. The wind held behind them like a door shutting. The Willowbrook Ranch sat quiet under a pale sky, its fences crooked but standing, its barn doors swinging softly in the wind. The girls arrived just as the light began to fade behind the hills, dust kicking up around the wagon wheels. Samuel helped them down without a word, pointing toward the bunkhouse with a gentle nod. No locks, no commands, just space, just shelter. Inside, the rooms were plain but clean. Rough quilts folded neatly on pinewood cots, a wash basin, a window facing the fields. Violet ran her fingers along the sill, dustless. Rose, still in her boots, paced once and sat on the edge of her bed, arms crossed tight. Lily leaned into her pillow like she wasn't used to softness, while Iris and Daisy whispered quietly to each other in the corner. No one told them what to do. No one told them they owed anything. That night they ate in the main lodge, bull stew thick with root vegetables and silence. Samuel ate at the head, the sons spaced out like fence posts. Marcus tall and broad, James with eyes that didn't meet anyone's, Benjamin, the middle son with steady hands, Daniel with a quiet smile, and Ethan, the youngest, with nervous hands that kept straightening the salt tin. The girls sat across from them, still bundled in shawls, watching more than eating. Lily's spoon clinked too loud. Violet dropped her napkin and startled when Marcus moved to hand it back. Rose never took her boots off, not even then. Iris barely touched her food, while Daisy's eyes darted between all the faces around the table. When dinner was done, Samuel stood. "This is your home until you say it ain't." Then he left, boots echoing on the wooden floor. Over the next few days, nothing was spoken, but things changed. Each morning, someone had drawn water before the sun crested the ridge. Wool shawls were folded on the porch rail when the wind picked up. A note scrawled on scrap parchment was pinned to the barn. "Storm coming by nightfall." The girls noticed. Didn't speak of it, but they noticed. Violet began sweeping the porch without being asked. Rose took to brushing the horses when no one was looking. Lily sat on the steps with her sketchbook, pages fluttering like flags in the breeze, while Iris helped with small chores around the kitchen, and Daisy gathered eggs from the hen house each morning. But the ghosts followed them in quiet ways. When the bunkhouse door creaked shut behind Violet, she flinched, her eyes going far off for a moment before she caught herself. Rose never removed her boots. Even when she slept, her hands curled tight beneath her pillow. And once, just before dawn, Lily screamed high and ragged, then wouldn't say why, just hugged her knees to her chest until the morning light found her. Iris would sometimes freeze mid-task, staring at nothing, while Daisy jumped at every sudden sound. The sons said nothing, made no advances. Marcus nodded when spoken to. James tipped his hat in passing. Benjamin once left Lily a carved rabbit beside her drawing. Daniel helped Iris with the heavy water buckets without being asked. Ethan left wildflowers on Daisy's windowsill. No one asked questions. No one demanded explanations. And slowly, like roots beneath dry soil, something began to settle. Not peace, not yet, but the first tremor of it. The kind that comes when no one is looking, the kind that grows in silence. The wind came low at first, a whistle through the pines, the kind you hear but don't listen to. But by dusk, it had turned savage, slapping shutters and rattling panes like fists pounding to be let in. Snow came with it, sideways, thick, and mean. Ice tapped the windows like warning knocks. Samuel moved through the ranch with the calm of someone who'd lived through worse, stacking wood near the hearth, checking that doors were barred and quilts laid thick when the first power flicker came. It was just a blink, then another. Then the chimney groaned like an old man waking. The lodge gathered them all, not because anyone said to, but because instinct pulled them in. Candles were struck. A stew pot hung over the fire. The flicker of flame turned everyone's face soft and unfamiliar. For the first time, the room wasn't divided by silence. It was held by it. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, his boots off for once, his smile shy. "One time," he began, voice tentative, "a goat got loose, ran into the outhouse, and wouldn't come out. Marcus tried to bribe it with jerky." He looked up at Lily. "Didn't work." Lily didn't laugh, but the corner of her mouth twitched. She pulled her blanket tighter. James sat near Rose, her coat in his lap. "This seems near gone," he murmured, holding the edge of it to the light. "A stitch here will save it from splitting." She didn't answer, just nodded. Her boots stayed on, but her hands relaxed on the bench near the fire. Violet sat still as kindling, arms wrapped around her middle. Marcus came over and sat beside her, not too close, but near enough that the warmth between them felt deliberate. From his coat pocket he pulled a square wrapped in cloth. A piece of apple bread crumbled at the edges. He didn't say a word as he handed it to her. Her fingers trembled when she took it. Daniel sat near Iris, offering her his extra blanket when she shivered. Benjamin carved small wooden animals for Daisy, who watched with wide eyes as the figures took shape in his steady hands. They sat like that for a while, watching the flames move across the logs, casting long shadows on the plank walls. The storm howled like it meant to tear the sky in half. And then, quiet as a whisper, Violet asked, "Why did your father take us?" Marcus didn't look away from the fire. "Maybe," he said slowly. "He saw women with nowhere to stand and thought we had room." Violet stared into the dancing light, the bread untouched in her lap. The power went out completely after that. The only glow came from lanterns set on shelves and the orange flicker of the fire. Snow beat the roof like a drum, but no one moved. The space between them wasn't tight anymore. It breathed, it warmed. No one tried to make the girls speak, but when Rose got up to add another log to the fire, James handed her one without words. When Lily's hands went still in her lap, Ethan slid his folded scarf into them. When Iris looked cold, Daniel wrapped his coat around her shoulders. When Daisy's eyes grew heavy, Benjamin made room beside him near the warmth. And when Marcus stood to stoke the coals, Violet reached out and laid her hand for the first time on someone else's. In the silence of a storm, things were said that words could never hold. The morning was crisp, the sky pale and streaked with the lavender haze of frost. Violet stood by the chicken coop, arms folded, breath curling in soft clouds. Her shawl had slipped halfway down her shoulder, and her braid hung loose, barely tied. She didn't shiver, though the cold clung to her like morning cloth. Marcus stepped into view quietly, holding a tin mug with both hands. The metal steamed against the cold. He offered it without a word. She took it, fingers brushing his. Their eyes met for only a moment, but it said more than morning greetings ever could. The wind tugged at her hair. One long strand slipped free and danced across her cheek. Without asking, Marcus reached out and began to braid it back. His hands were steady, but unsure, as if remembering something he'd seen done once, long ago by a mother, now gone. He weaved each strand slowly, his fingers rough, careful. Violet stood still, the heat of the coffee warming her chest, his hands warming something deeper. When he finished, he didn't tie it, just let the braid hang loose over her shoulder, tucked beneath the shawl. They didn't speak, but something between them, something long buried, began to rise like smoke from kindling. Later that week, Lily took ill. The fever came fast and hard. Her small frame trembled in the bunkhouse bed, soaked in sweat. Rose refused to leave her side, sponging her forehead, holding her hand. Iris and Daisy took turns reading to her, their voices soft and soothing. Ethan fetched water in pails so cold his fingers split. Samuel stood in the doorway every night, his head bowed, lips moving in silent prayer. Marcus chopped wood like a man possessed, not just for heat, but to have something to do when the fear grew too loud. Violet brought soup, sat beside the bed, whispered stories, ran fingers through Lily's damp hair until the fever broke. 3 nights later, just before dawn, when Lily opened her eyes, her voice was thin but clear. "Is this still his house?" she asked. Violet started to answer, but Lily shook her head and whispered, "No, it's ours now." The words wrapped around the room like warmth. From that day, things changed. Not suddenly, but softly. Rose asked James if he would teach her to shoot. He did, but only after she taught him how to sharpen a knife without bending the blade. Lily slipped 2 extra biscuits into Ethan's coat pocket every morning. He never said a word, but he always smiled wider after breakfast. Iris began helping Daniel with the morning chores, their quiet conversations growing longer each day. Daisy and Benjamin worked together in the small garden, her laughter becoming more frequent as the flowers bloomed, and Violet sat beside Marcus on the porch at sunset one evening. She didn't bring a shawl. He didn't offer one. They sat in silence as the sky burned gold, the kind of silence that holds space for something sacred. Marcus cleared his throat once, then again. "I reckon you've got reason to leave still," he murmured. "But if you're thinking of staying, not just here, I mean, with me." Violet looked out across the land. The barn's shadow stretched long. The fields rippled with wind. Somewhere behind them, the fire in the hearth crackled softly. She turned to him, eyes unreadable, but steady. "I stopped running the night you handed me bread." He didn't reach for her hand. She didn't offer it, but they sat closer after that. That night, the fire wasn't just for warmth. It glowed brighter than usual. It didn't flicker, held, and in the quiet hush of a home finally becoming whole, the flames whispered promises no one needed to say aloud. The thaw came slow and gentle like forgiveness. Frost loosened its grip on the fields, and wildflowers, those stubborn little things, pushed their way up through the hard ground like they had every right to bloom. The ranch, once a place of caution and quiet breath, now rang with the sound of life. Lily, her laughter still rare but radiant when it came, began planting near the barn. She made neat little rows and whispered to the seeds as she laid them down, as if giving them secrets to grow by. Rose helped James mend a fence line that had been leaning since winter. She worked with her sleeves rolled high, dirt under her nails, her chin tilted in that proud, unbending way. James didn't correct her swing anymore. He just smiled when her hammer hit home. Iris spent her mornings with Daniel, learning to tend the animals, her gentle touch perfect for the work. Daisy helped Benjamin expand the garden, her excitement infectious as each new sprout appeared. Violet came out one morning with a ribbon in her hair, pale green, soft-edged, once her mother's. Marcus noticed first, said nothing, but he stood a little taller. That day, then came the shadow. Their father rode into Cedar Falls mid-afternoon, his horse thin, his breath heavy with whiskey. He made noise at the Golden Horse Saloon, told anyone who'd listen that he'd been robbed, that he wanted his daughters back or else payment in full, that they weren't legally released, that he still had rights. The sheriff sent for Samuel. Samuel came down off the ridge with Marcus at his side. No guns, no threats, just boots and dust, and a voice made of flint. He looked the man in the eye and said, "No one sells what they never cherished." The sheriff, an old friend of Samuel's, tipped his hat and turned his back. The father grunted, cursed, and rode off into the hills, smaller than he'd arrived, swallowed by the land that had long since stopped forgiving him. Back at the ranch, things didn't resume. They deepened. That night, Marcus sanded a cedar plank by hand. Then he took a wood-burning iron and carved 5 names into it with the patience of a man etching permanence. Rose Thompson, Lily Thompson, Violet Thompson, Iris Thompson, Daisy Thompson, double asterisk. He nailed it above the front door before sunrise. The wedding wasn't grand, just curtains dyed with berries stitched by candlelight. The dresses hung imperfect and lovely, swaying like hope on a clothesline. There were no vows spoken loudly, no guests beyond the wind and the stars. But when each daughter stepped out of the bunkhouse and into the open yard, their hearts were full and their hands already held. They weren't just brides, they were builders of fences, of futures, of something that couldn't be bought. Samuel stood to the side, arms crossed, eyes shining but unreadable. Not once did he say, "I'm proud." He didn't need to. And when the long table was set that evening, with worn smooth plates mismatched, bread steaming, the family gathered. Not perfect, not always easy, but chosen. Rose teased James over his terrible biscuit recipe. Lily passed Violet the last piece of pie. Iris and Daniel shared quiet jokes that made them both smile. Daisy showed Benjamin her newest drawing. Marcus brushed a hair from Violet's cheek like it was sacred. And Samuel, for once, didn't eat alone. The sun dipped low behind the ridge, casting gold over everything. And for the first time in their lives, the girls didn't feel like they were waiting to be taken back.